So sorry about that. Okay,
No
carry
problem.
on.
Yeah. So some significant benefits here. There are a number of subbasins that are no longer depleted, um, but the sort of the key takeaway here is the entire upper two-thirds of the watershed is unchanged. Right? And this is scenario 6. All the scenarios together, you can see the scale of the benefits. The large portions of the watershed see significant benefits as a result of eliminating groundwater withdrawals over the summer in these communities. And bringing it all together in sort of a summary table, right? I think it's helpful to see it visually, sort of distributed across the watershed. Here we've looked at some watershed-wide averages of the potential changes. You saw a lot of this visually, but now you can sort of see the hard and fast numbers, right? So scenario 1 appeared sort of to affect the most subbasins and you know, not including scenario 6, which is a combination, but scenario 1 really showed a lot of benefits up and down the watershed. The lowest estimated groundwater category and biologic category, sort of greater than the others. You can also see that the August median flow, right? This is not a WMA tool metric. Scenario 3 really didn't do much for the WMA metrics. It's because surface water doesn't affect those, but you can see there was a noteworthy benefit to the August median affected flow, right? Not as significant as alternative 1, but certainly more beneficial to August median flow output than some of the WMA metrics. So what kind of pops out here, looking at which scenarios are most effective, which ones move the needle the most, is scenario 1, clearly, and then scenario 5 is sort of a second best. So that's what's most effective, but you might recall that those two scenarios included the greatest reductions in groundwater withdrawals, right? That water needs to come from somewhere, so it's that much more water that needs to be sourced elsewhere. It's useful to understand how the sort of normalize these benefits by dividing by the withdrawals that need to be sourced elsewhere, right? Starting to answer where's your best bang for the buck. So you can think of that as what scenarios are most efficient. And that's what this table is here, right? This is the reduction in pumping. Scenario 1 is the greatest, scenario 5 is the second greatest, and the others are smaller. And here we've divided the change in flow alteration or the change in net groundwater depletion. We've divided it by the groundwater reduction. And so now we can see how efficient they are. And again, scenario 1 and scenario 5 are still the most efficient. It's just the way it turned out here. But so you can see scenario 1 and scenario 5 tend to give more bang for their buck. It is worth noting scenario 3, right, the August median flow, that is second highest here. So while scenarios 1 and 5 performed very well, they're both effective and efficient, scenario 3 does seem to produce some significant benefits with regard to August median flow. I'll just sort of bring it all together. I think a lot of these things have been said before by Neil or I, but just some things to consider, right? This model was developed from the WMA tool. It's focused on August median conditions, right? It's a snapshot in time to offer a relative comparison of one alternative to another or one alternative to baseline. And while some things have been updated about this model, like public water supply withdrawals, not all of them have private wells, below threshold withdrawals, and public and private wastewater returns. Right? Those things have not been updated. So just take the results with a grain of salt. Key takeaways, as far as the results go, are we consistently saw that, regardless of scenario, 90% of the withdrawal reductions, right, 90% of the withdrawals from groundwater wells were experienced in the nearby surface water bodies within 3 months. We saw that the upstream reductions, right, scenario 1 is a great example of this. Upstream reductions can have a significant trickle-down effect to subbasins and waterways throughout the rest of the watershed. which makes them more efficient, or can make them more efficient. And we saw that scenarios 1 and 5 generally were both effective and efficient. And we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Andy. There is a question already from Dwayne. Dwayne, do you want to just unmute and ask your question verbally?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's written right there. I mean, you guys said you had a way to consider surface water withdrawals impacts on August. I'm wondering what that was.
Yeah, I'll start with this. Andy might pipe in later. I mean, so first I want to say I believe that I misspoke in talking about there being disagreement about if the on the ground flow results were different than the model. That's not the case. There is, I think everyone agrees that the certainly for the lower watershed, the gains in flow that have occurred since the early 2000s are not as great as the model is indicating for a whole number of potential reasons. If there is agreement, it might be about what those reasons might be. And I guess the reason, so first I wanted to correct that mistake, but second, sort of related. So moving beyond, there are things that folks do disagree about, and how to deal with the surface water flows is one of those things that there has been some disagreement, at least between Andy and I and some members of the steering committee. And we've adapted an approach here that is either, again, depending on your point of view, is either the correct approach, or in my and Andy's point of view, it's a minimum approach of what the benefits of seizing reductions from those surface water reservoirs would be. So Dwayne, the approach was that Vicky Zulte calculated the sustainable yield estimator unaffected August flows coming out of these two inline reservoirs that were part of our assessment here. Those got added back into the baseline condition and then removed, and then the withdrawals from there were, I'm not saying this correctly, but the point is the entirety of the pumping or the withdrawals from those reservoirs was not a benefit that was ascribed to the model. The only benefit was you could put the sustainable yield estimator flows back in that might have been reduced. Maybe, Andy, can you say that a little clearer perhaps than I just did?
Yeah, no, I think you got the gist of it. I think the idea is the intention was to reflect the fact that in a typical August condition, because those reservoirs are tapped for water supply, they generally no longer spill water over their primary spillways. And so the impact of operating those reservoirs in that way during a typical August is basically the elimination of the unaffected August medium flow that would otherwise move through the impoundment and into the downstream channel if the reservoir weren't there, if the pumping of the reservoir did not occur. And that we had many spirited conversations about it, and I think there's arguments on both sides. You can write it's a mass balance model, so the way those were incorporated doesn't necessarily reflect the the withdrawal of water from other parts of the watershed and discharge into the reservoirs. And there's also consideration that flow downstream of dams is not entirely from the primary spillway, but that there's significant base flow in summer conditions as well. And I think that at the end of the day, that there's a lot of complexity on how the relationship between surface water bodies and groundwater bodies, and trying to nail down the perfect way to evaluate that miss the point of the study, which is to understand relatively the benefits of one scenario to the other. And so there was some collaboration and compromise there.
Yeah, we could easily spend the rest of the call and then some going into the details of that, which we don't want to. But I guess the takeaway is that a fair assessment has been done, and depending on your point of view, it's either the exactly right assessment, or perhaps it's the minimal benefit that can be had, and there might be better benefit. So
And
Dwayne,
Dwayne, I'm good. I was part of those spirited discussions, so I'm just going to try to sum up in one sentence what I think the answer to your question is, which is that for the baseline condition, since you know the WMA tool did not treat them at all, for the baseline condition, the August median flow is estimated by SYE at the dams. For the
Yep.
3 inline reservoirs in the watershed, actually, it did include one that wasn't manipulated for the scenarios. That was part of the Salem-Beverly system. For 3 inline reservoirs, the August median flow was taken out of those subbasins because for the reasons Andy said, that this assumption is no water is spilling over those dams. And for the 2 scenarios that involved ceasing operation of Danvers systems, those August median flows were added back in as if those became run-of-the-river dams.
Thank you for that. And Sarah, as you know, I was lucky enough to be part of those conversations as well. So thanks for that explanation.
Other questions about any element of this presentation today? Oh, Ross, I see your hand up. Thank you. Ross, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It was mentioned several times that the data for private well withdrawals and septic discharges back into the groundwater were not updated, and so you've been using historic data. It's not completely clear to me, but and I also understand that the focus of the model is public water supply withdrawals and turning those off and the effects on flows. But I represent a town of Boxford where it's public water supply and septic systems on 2-acre lots. So you have a sort of a cyclical system where you have the withdrawal from a well on a 2-acre lot, and then all of that water, except for what's ever consumed, is going back into the septic system and back into the groundwater. We have always assumed that results in a limited or minimal impact on groundwater supplies. But I did notice in one of your earlier charts that you showed some rather significant areas of Boxford that, well, an area of Boxford that had significant, it was one of the very first charts you showed, was areas shown in red, going back even further. And I just wanted to get a clearer idea of what there you go. I believe that some areas of Boxford there are showing red, and that would be in the Parker River system outside your study area, but you show areas of Boxford in yellow and so forth. I just wanted to know if the assumptions with regard to a Boxford scenario are accurate or reflect the same sort of assumption that we have, which is of limited impact.
Would you like to take that up, or would you like me to ask Dwayne to answer that? Because in a sense, he's asking about the WMA tool starting point. So if you have an answer for that, you can jump in, but I can also ask Dwayne to address that.
Yeah, Dwayne may want to. I mean, this screen is just a direct screenshot of the current conditions. SWIMI, if you look it up on the line. So has nothing to do with the model that Andy and I made. That's just the output. And Dwayne, I don't know if you do feel like you're able to add any insight into what that is, then please do. But
my suspicion, without digging deeper in it, looking at that map, is the private wells. I mean, you have enough private wells in Boxford that to get to a category 3, which is the yellow, which most of Boxford is showing as, those private wells represent more than 10% of August median flow. So, I mean, that's we've generally reviewed the hard red and the pinks as, are most impacted. But not to say that, private wells don't impact it. And I think that Boxford is an example of without digging too deep, I suspect that's the private wells showing.
Oh yeah,
you know,
looking closer now, Gwen, that's definitely correct, right? Because the screen that's being shown is the groundwater category, which is based
Yeah.
on flow alteration, which does not take into account the wastewater returns.
Well,
Okay, that does help. If it's not taking into account the septic discharges at all, well, it's only showing half the story. So I was concerned that if this is your starting point, then your model is somehow disadvantaging private well systems relative to public water supply systems.
Yeah, there's another map that they didn't put in the presentation. It's called the August net depletion map. It was mentioned, which would show colors, which would factor in the wastewater returns. And I
Okay, so
suspect that Boxford map would significantly change as a result of that.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
For just that reason, you'll find that the report focuses more on net groundwater depletion than the other WMA metrics.
Just letting you know I'm paying attention. That's all.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the question and thanks for the collective answer on that. Representative Cairns?
Hi, good afternoon. I am juggling public health responsibilities and this, and so, dueling Zooms are not a great idea, but I did want to zero in if I could, because I don't think there's anyone here from Danvers, but I'm looking at this map. I'm sorry, forgive me. Can you tell me again what the colors correspond to? What category?
Sure. The darker blue is a 1, and the dark red are 5s. So sort of most.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Andrew, can I jump in here?
Please.
So I'm the program chief of the water management program. So thanks.
Hi.
Question.
Hi
Hi. So this is the tool that we developed. The dark reds are the most impacted, meaning the GWC is 55% or more. That's the comparison of the pumping volumes to unaffected August flows. So the reds are the worst.
Only in
The
August.
Sorry.
Right? Only in August.
Well, that's the comparison. Yes, it's a comparison of pumping in August. Yes, that's what the whole map represents the most impact on fluvial fish. That is what this map represents.
On what?
And on fluvial fish that live in rivers or streams at some portion of their life. This is reflecting those areas that impact fish the most.
Okay.
August was identified as one of those key indicators. So again, the darker the red, the more impact. That's a 5. The pinks are 4s. A yellow is a 3. A light blue is a 2, and a dark blue is a 1. 1 being the least impacted. So few groundwater withdrawals in August.
If I may.
Yep.
So is this showing me that most of Danvers is blue, or is part of that, because I don't see Middleton being on the Danvers border. Of course it is, but maybe your map is just focusing on, yeah, right where you're moving your cursor.
Yep.
So does that mean part of Danvers is blue and a little bit is red, or is this all Middleton, Topsfield that's red?
No, there's some of Danvers from, again, without a deep dive into the lines, but yes, the area of Danvers that's actually in the Ipswich River Basin is red. That divide that he's putting his cursor on is the divide between the water, and that subbasin flows to Salem Sound. It's in the North Coastal. So there's multiple subbasins in Danvers, as there are multiple subbasins in Middleton. You're not able to pull, there's some smaller lines in there separating these into subbasins. But yes, Danvers, those subbasins in the Ipswich are showing as category 5s.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And thanks, Dwayne. Jen, go ahead.
Jen Peterson, Mass Water Works, and I had the benefit of living through SWIMI with some of you all. So some of this is more familiar to me than I care to remember. But you said for your model that on the biological category piece that you were only looking at the flow component of that. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because the understanding from SWIMI was that the impervious cover sort of effect on fluvial fish is significant. So how do you pull the flow piece out of that?
Sure, good question. As I understand, the biological category is affected by sort of 4 factors, and like you said, impervious cover is one of them. It was right. 3 of them stay constant throughout all the scenarios, and so we calculated how we held those other factors constant in the model, and just like the WMA tool does. And when we manipulated the groundwater withdrawal for a particular well or in a particular subbasin, we recalculated the biological category, holding those 3 other things constant and only changing the groundwater withdrawal value.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question, which I guess, sort of as a layperson, if I'm looking at this and see that the groundwater withdrawals have essentially been reduced by half, but we're not seeing sort of the commensurate improvements in the river. I know you talked about the model and the model limitations and all of that, but how do we move forward looking at scenarios knowing that what we're seeing on the ground doesn't match up with what the potential improvement should be given the reductions we've seen? Like, this premise is that if we make certain changes, like removing all the groundwater withdrawals, we're going to see this improvement in the river. But that hasn't been the case with what has happened. So can you maybe dig into that a little bit?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, Jen, let me start with that, if you would, please, because there's been a lot of discussion about this. I think everyone, maybe not everyone, but most acknowledge that there are a lot of factors involved in affecting flow in the river. And as I said at the beginning, this model focused on, for right or for wrong, it focused on the water supply options with the viewpoint of evaluating one versus the other. It doesn't mean that stormwater is not still important. It doesn't mean that private wells are not still important. We've heard, that there's been a large increase in shifting to private well withdrawals for irrigation. To my knowledge, there's not a lot of great hard real data to support that so much as there is, opinion that is, may well be right, or, I just can't comment on that. All of that stuff is important, and it doesn't mean it should be ignored. But if you're going to look at some things to change, and water supply, again, as I said, is the one that currently has regulations around it. So fair or unfair, it's the one that's going to get attention now. This is helping you evaluate which one will give you the most bang for your buck efficiency wise. I think it's a little bit, it doesn't help to get focused on the magnitude of that. Like it's just not what this was intended to do. All of these things are important. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's what this is intended to deal with, is how you evaluate these options against each other.
If I can, Neil, I go one step further and say, what's missing from the WMA tool and from this model is when you withdraw less water from the watershed's aquifers, it means more water in streams, which means more evapotranspiration, right? Neither the WMA tool nor this model sort of captures that complexity, right? Those feedback loops. That's a much more detailed, comprehensive model. But neither the WMA tool nor our model sort of accounting for increased evapotranspiration, for example. It doesn't change the fact that a scenario that leaves more water in the stream available for ET, it provides a greater benefit than one that leaves less water in the stream. So if the goal of the model is to be able to compare scenarios, it still does that, even if the precise stream flow value is, is sort of untrustworthy.
We are coming right up on 2. So we see one more hand raised. We'll get back to you in a minute, Representative Cairns. If people need to jump off, obviously you can. But we will be setting up a next meeting later in December. And we'll carry on some of these more in-depth questions and discussions on both of the studies that we heard presented on. So this is not your last bite at the apple to dig further into this. Go ahead, Representative Cairns.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I think that's the perfect setup for me to, I won't ask it now, but I would like to have the opportunity to ask, I guess, any, either Neil, Andrew, Dwayne, are you 3 with Horsley Witten, Weston Sampson?
Dwayne is with the
Anybody?
state.
I'm with the state. I work for DEP, and again, the Water Management Program, which is the group who developed and paid for the model here, the swimming model, with the USGS, and does the permitting available.
Okay, great. Could I just follow up with both of you after this with my questions rather than make everyone suffer through them?
Yes, sure. I'll shoot you my email and phone number now if you'd like.
Great, and that, or put it in the chat, and then
Yeah.
also for Neil and Andrew, one, both, I don't care.
I am typing in the chat as we speak.
Okay, beautiful, thank you.
And I see that Jen asked when the actual report will be released. Great question. I should have brought that up earlier. Very, very soon. We just received a near final draft of this report on Friday, I believe, Friday evening, and we are going to receive a near final draft of the one that we heard from earlier in November, October 29th, by December 6th, if not sooner. So we will do a final review of those. It may be another 2-week turnaround for each, but I would say by the end of the calendar year, we should have not only the final reports available for review, but hopefully an executive summary for each that would be as lay-oriented as we could make those be for easy digestion of conclusions. Great. Any other, I still see your hand up, but I think that's just leftover, Representative Cairns, yeah?
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. Bye.
So,
Boring.
no, thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording. There is a small chance that because of my bumping myself out of the meeting, the first half of the meeting will not have been recorded. We'll try to deal with that the best that we can.